Oral arguments at the Supreme Court today showed that even the conservative justices are, shall we say, troubled by Donald Trump's attempts to end birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented immigrants and temporary residents. And that skepticism was plain to see for everyone in the courtroom. It would appear even Donald Trump. After publicly attacking the justices for days, today Donald Trump became the first ever sitting president to attend oral arguments before the highest court. Sitting in the public gallery, Donald Trump heard the Chief Justice swiftly shoot down the arguments made by his Solicitor General.
You obviously put a lot of weight on subject to the jurisdiction thereof. But the examples you give to support that strike me as very quirky.
We're in a new world now, as Justice Alito pointed out, where 8 billion people are one plane ride away from having a child who's a U.S. citizen.
Well, it's a new world. It's the same Constitution.
I mean, there's that. There were a slew of arguments and concerns brought up one by nearly every justice. We'll let you listen to some of them.
The text of the clause, I think, does not support you. I think you're sort of looking for some more technical, esoteric meaning. As far as I can tell, at the time of the 14th, you're using some pretty obscure sources to get to this concept.
How does this work? Are you suggesting that when a baby is born, people have to have documents, present documents? Is this happening in the delivery room? How are we determining when or whether a newborn child is a citizen of the United States under your rule?
You say that the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to put all slaves on equal footing, newly freed slaves on equal footing, and so they would be citizens. But that's not textual. So how do you get there?
I get the point. Thinking about, European countries don't have this, or most other countries, many other countries in the world don't have this. Doesn't that, I guess I'm not seeing the relevance as a legal, constitutional, interpretive matter.
During our coverage, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Justice Department, Mary McCord, her organization, the Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection, won the first nationwide preliminary injunction against Donald Trump's birthright citizenship order. Alex is with me as well. Mary, tell me what you heard today.
So I feel very positive after listening to that argument. As you just illustrated with the excerpts, there was a lot of skepticism about John Sauer's position. It is not like Cecilia Wong arguing for the babies and pregnant mothers. It's not like she didn't get any tough questions, but I would say the tougher ones went to John Sauer. And it's because his position is not consistent with the text of the 14th Amendment or a statute enacted by Congress almost 100 years later in 1940 and 1952. And certainly Congress, if they'd had problems with the way the 14th Amendment had been applied, right, or interpreted, or problems with the way that the Supreme Court had interpreted in the 1898 case of Wong Kim Ark, they could have done something differently in 1940 or 1952, but they didn't. So, I feel like the government has been really struggling over the course of all the briefing for the last year on the cases that have been brought challenging this to find a theory that would work and that would exempt from birthright citizenship that relies on jus soli, being born on the soil of the land and not who your parents are. They've really struggled to find a theory, and they landed on this domicile theory that just doesn't really have a lot of roots anywhere other than the fact the word is mentioned a number of times in the Wong Kim Ark case, but it is not load-bearing in that case.
Mary, what did you think, other than the fact that he had the free time, about him being there today?
Of the president? So, you can't help but think, given the way he attacked the justices after the tariff decision, has continued to attack them, including as recently, I think, as last night or maybe even this morning, you can't help but think that some measure of what he was trying to do was be an intimidating presence. I will tell you, listening to the argument, though, I didn't see any indication that any one of the 9 justices was feeling that. John Sauer might have been feeling the pressure because his boss was there, and, his position depends on the president of the United States. You could hear his voice get more and more exercised and animated. It almost was like he was getting faster and faster and almost yelling at times. But I don't think it impacted the justices.
Alex, the attacks against judges are a feature of this. We were talking last block about differences between 1.0 and 2.0. The frontal menacing threats against judges, smearing them as left lunatic judges, whether they were appointed by Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush or George W. Bush or Donald Trump, is a constant refrain. We don't always follow what happens next, but Judge Esther Salas has been here and talked about how her murdered son, his name is invoked when people send pizzas to judges' homes. They come in the name of her son, who was murdered by a disgruntled litigant who came to her house. I mean, the threat of violence against judges is real. And I just wonder what his presence there was about. He's not someone who has ever, as far as we've known, steeped himself in constitutional legal arguments or debates. He's never live tweeted oral arguments before, but he showed up. Why?
Well, fully intimidation. I mean, there's no question that that's what it was. First American president to do that. Really a low point for the separation of powers, to say nothing of, the sort of moral fabric that governs this democracy. It is worth mentioning that here's one of the most virulently anti-racist, anti-immigrant presidents ever, who's married to an immigrant who was not born here, whose own mother was an immigrant, and seems to have forgotten both his own personal history and the history of this country, and instead had his legal team trot out literally racist arguments from 1896 that were built around just very toxic anti-Black and anti-Chinese sentiments at the turn of the century, and then regurgitate and recycle those arguments again at the Supreme Court. It failed then, and I do believe it's going to fail now. I mean, but the fact that John Eastman was on the steps of the Supreme Court after this is a powerful reminder that this anti-birthright citizenship movement is really the stuff of crazed, conspiratorial, racist kooks. This is John Eastman's bailiwick, right? And somehow
January 6th fame.
Exactly, dignified in the highest court of the land with the president of the United States sitting in on it. I mean, just like, we talk about shredding norms. This is really like above and beyond, even for the Trump administration.